What is, in your mind, the biggest question or questions that remain unanswered that are political, not legal, political questions unanswered in the Hillary Clinton email fiasco? Fred.
In my opinion, is this just one more in a long, long stream of foibles that Hillary has kind of foisted upon herself? Is she being honest and truthful now with the answers that we heard the other day? Hard to buy that.
Chris.
Look, I mean, my perspective on this is that, at the end of the day, after all this sound and fury, partisans on the left have gone to their corner, partisans on the right have gone to their corner. I think really, for me, the real big political question is that when she announces, is she going to be prepared to announce with a big idea, a theory of the case? Because that, to me, is really the single most critical element that's out there in terms of her moving forward. I'm very confident that she will, but to me, that's the big political question out there.
Chris, in watching her over her career...
I think Chris is right.
Go ahead, Fred.
Chris is right because she has to change the subject. I've talked to a lot of people this week that think this email thing will be short-lived. I don't think it will until she changes the subject.
Fred, is there anything about... Go ahead, Chris. You keep going.
No, I was just going to say, to me, this is a really interesting, general election when we get there. But for her, right, that general election, she has the competitive advantage of it potentially starting earlier than others. So the sooner that she's able to get out there with a really big idea, an idea that gives her theory of the case, that actually emphasizes the competitive advantage that she has in this election. She doesn't necessarily have a primary challenge. The ability to go out there, fill up the cup, dominate the conversation, and position herself is a huge competitive advantage. And so that to me is why I keep coming back to, is there going to be a big idea out there? I think we've seen green shoots of it. We saw a little bit of it out here when she was at Santa Clara. We saw some stuff at the end of the midterms. I'm confident that she will have that. But to me, that's a huge competitive advantage that she really needs to lever.
Fred, in the short term and then over the longer term, this email controversy, does it help any of the Republican candidates more than the others?
Oh, I don't think it necessarily does. You could build a case, that Jeb did release some of his ease and didn't and all that. I think it's a big advantage to the Republicans in general versus Hillary, because Chris is right. There is no credible there's no credible primary in the Democrat side this year. So I think it's everybody versus Hillary, and she gave them great fodder.
Chris, let me just ask you, you guys have both said this, I just want to put a fine point on it. You don't think that anything that's happened over the course of the last week has increased the odds of a plausible, credible challenger stepping forward to take Hillary Clinton on?
No, I've seen absolutely no signs that, that there's even a crack in the door on that front. Look, I think one of the reasons, obviously, to go out there and answer the questions was to make sure that you never even got to that point. But if you just look at where she is on the ground, where she is in terms of public standing, where she is with the key constituency groups, where she is with the donor community, it's really, really, really difficult to see someone out there who could really be a serious enterprise threat in a primary. And I think a lot of smart candidates know that, understand that, and recognize that.
Fred Davis, you work with Senator Corker, who's one of the few Republican senators who didn't sign that letter on Iran that Tim Cotton circulated. I'm curious what you think the reasons were and what it says about the Republican Party that people like the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee and Lamar Alexander, also from Tennessee, didn't sign it, but most Republican senators did.
Senator Corker and Senator Alexander are both clients of mine. I know them very well. They're very reasonable human beings. They're not bomb throwers, and they would just like to see the world progress in a better way, and they won't step out. And my guess is they will never sign something.
So, Fred,
like
I'll put words in your mouth. I guess what you're saying is the rest of the Republican Senate conference are a bunch of irresponsible bomb throwers?
No, but I think you're talking about two people that are very much thought leaders on the Republican side, and I think I could imagine them in caucus talking about that, and I can just see them saying, let's take the practical, calm, reasoned approach.
Chris, do you think that...
Mark and John, you guys had talked in the earlier segment about, the idea that it's better to have a primary challenge because you don't end up having to run against the press. It's a smart and good point, but I would posit that if you look at this issue of the 47 signatures, the Department of Homeland Security being closed down or threatened to close down last week, each week goes by where the Republican right would in effect be creating a huge issue for the presumed Democratic nominee, Hillary Clinton, to engage on those issues. So I don't think it is a either or. Either she has a primary opponent and she has to deal with that, or she's running in a primary effectively against the press, as was being suggested. I actually think this is a real opportunity for her to go out there and run against the Republican field, and also run against some of the ideas that are coming out of the Republican Party that would generate energy, interest, and also really position her well.
Fred, do you think it would be smart, given what you just said about the letter, about what people on the left call the 47 traitors, given that all of that, it's become a little bit of a litmus test among Republican presidential potential runners, right? Some of them have signed on to that letter. Rick Perry is one, Bobby Jindal is another. Do you think it would be smart for some other Republican, to stand up with Corker and Alexander and say, I think this letter was a bad idea? Smart politically.
I do. Well, you and I have talked many times about there possibly being two Republican parties. And this represents Corker and Lamar's position is the more maybe reasonable or middle-of-the-road Republican Party, and those on the far side would send the letter in a heartbeat. So, it's all going to... it's just going to come down to, at one of these days, those two parties coming together so we can have somebody beat Hillary.
But Fred, would you counsel a Jeb Bush or a Scott Walker or a Marco Rubio? Let's go with the governors. Jeb Bush and a Scott Walker to take a strong stance against that letter for political gain?
No, I wouldn't. I'd try. No, but if you think of Bob Corker and Lamar Alexander, they didn't take a strong stance against the letter. They simply decided not to sign it.
Well,
I thought that was the more reasonable
Chris,
approach.
we got to go in a second. I want to get you both on the record before we go. One name answer. Who is the Republican frontrunner for president today? Chris first.
Oh, Jeb Bush, but John McCain would have stood up on that issue if he was in this race.
All right, Fred, who's the Republican frontrunner right now for president?
Two Republican parties, Jeb Bush for the establishment, Scott Walker for the farther right wing. Okay.